I believe we are now live. Okay. Hi, everybody. Mike Warner here. Just before we get into this, obviously you can see my guest that way to the to the other side of me, Andrea Young. I will be introducing Andrea in just a second. But first, I wanted to let you know this is live, but it is also a live recording for the Streamline Podcast. So I will record a quick introduction now for the podcast while everybody is getting on board. And then I'll introduce my guest and we'll get straight into it. Welcome. Let's do it. All right. Welcome to this episode of the Streamline Podcast. My guest today is Andrea Young. Andrea, welcome.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
You have a much cooler setup than I do today, I must say. For anybody that's watching this live video stream, what's going on in the background there?
Yeah. I'm in Rochester, New York, and I'm at a record store that's been around for 45 years called Record Archive, and they are so cool. And I was here last night. They have a performance space in the back of the store, and I was here last night for their Elvis Presley tribute with a band out of Albany called the Luster Kings. It was rocking. It was so much fun. And they're so kitschy. I mean, look, it's so camp. It's so fabulous. So I thought it'd make a good backdrop talking about music.
Certainly does. And it kind of puts mine to shame, but that's okay. I have to do some decorating after seeing that.
Or come to Record Archive and buy some kitschy things that will help you make atmosphere.
Definitely. So, and Andrea, for anybody that isn't familiar with you and your work with DPG worldwide and previous work as well, could you introduce yourself for the audience?
Yeah, I've been around the space for a long time, and I've seen lots of changes, of course. But I've run a public radio station. I have a radio show. But some years ago, I started to help artists understand the streaming space because it was, this was 3 or so years ago. And I started out as Coral Young, and now the company is DPG Worldwide. But pretty much what we do is we build artists' presence on the streaming platforms with them and their teams. So we're just looking for best practices and everything that we can find about the best way to do that, because you know better than anybody how Wild West crazy it is out there, right?
Oh yeah. So it's crazy, but it's fun.
Oh, it's really fun. I love it. So I've been a curator. Curation's my passion. So live shows are not my passion. Curation's my passion. So I'm all about recorded music. That's just something that I love. And so that's our focus. That's what our team does. We just reach out through user-generated playlists, through third-party playlists, which is just one of those ways to build your following, build engagement. It's one of the ways, right?
One of many, and no doubt we're going to spend a lot of time on that topic today. I think that's how you and I first connected, was the power of playlists. And
yes.
I remember our first meeting very well, because it was I believe it was one of those meetings that was meant to be maybe 1 hour, and then it ended up being more than half a day. And I believe you had a flight to catch, and that was the only reason we had to stop talking. It was just... it was one of those meetings. You find somebody who's on your level, who is in the same area as you, and we just had a lot of fun, and we just nerded out.
I do remember that, and that's exactly right. And that's the thing, that's somehow what is what I love. It's somehow what I love. I don't know why. I could love anything, right? I could love all sorts of other things, but it's curation and playlists and artists and getting music heard. So yes, I could talk about that all day and all night. So let's go.
Bring it on.
Right.
So we've actually, this is great. While you've been chatting, I've been sneakily off camera looking at some of the comments that have come in already. We've had a few comments coming in on LinkedIn, so I figured this is a great starting point. We have Ada Heston wrote this comment on LinkedIn. I can't put this up on the screen, but I'll read it out. The
Okay.
question is, what advice do you have for new singer-songwriters starting out and trying to get their music listened to? So new singer-songwriters who are just starting out and trying to get people to listen to their music.
Mm. Yeah, this is our sweet spot, actually. That's a great question. And there's so many answers because I think it really depends where your fan engagement is to start. Do you have any fan engagement? I mean, you have family and you have friends, right? So where is your fan engagement? If it's, for example, on Twitter or other social media, then I would start with that fan base and drive them to the streaming platforms. Drive them to listen there, drive them to your profile, drive them to take that journey as a fan, as our friend Ariel Hyatt from Cyber PR says, take that journey as a fan and get started engaging with you. So that's the sort of general answer to that question. There are many specifics that we could talk about as well, but I think the platforms, they're businesses, do you know? And they want to know that you're driving ears and eyes to their platform. So that's really, I think, what the focus should be. Driving your fans to the streaming platforms. Make sense?
Absolutely. And it's a very good point you made. Some of those fans may already be on the streaming platforms, but may not be aware that you are on there, believe it or not. And so by sending them directly to it, you're actually making it easier for them to find you, follow you, and continue to engage with you. Obviously, the other side is there's artists out there that will actually drive their fans or their friends, their family to streaming and get them and encourage them to sign up, even do a free trial. Believe it or not, not everybody still consumes music through streaming. So there are still people out there that you could potentially help to convert. And it doesn't mean that they have to let go of that amazing CD collection, their record collection. Not at all. It's just another way that they can access music and hear it. So yeah, definitely going up to them. And, you know, some of them you may need to just say, hey, have you ever heard of Spotify? Have you heard of Apple Music? Let me show you how easy it is to use, and let me show you my music on there.
Yeah, you know, I think that's an interesting point. So if your fans are not already on there, you're educating them, just like the streaming platforms are educating you as an artist as to what you can do to get your music heard. You know, my thing is I find music everywhere, right? Like I'm walking through an indoor mall in New York City. I hear a track over the loudspeaker system, and I Shazam it, right? I'm in my car, I Shazam something or whatever. Television shows. It's not just on the streaming platforms, but once I hear something I really love, I want to know everything about that track. I want to be able to find it. I want to know about the artist as much as I can as possible. So that's the other thing, is to make sure if you're starting out, my recommendation would be that you are everywhere. It doesn't mean you have to have a huge presence, because that takes a lot of time and energy and a build, right? It doesn't happen overnight. But just make sure you can be found on Spotify. You can be found by Alexa. I did a really fun thing a little while ago where we work with an artist, Michael Colton. And every time I told Alexa to play Michael Colton, Alexa played Michael Bolton. So I shouted out on social media to Michael Bolton, who responded actually about how much Alexa loves him more than anybody else. So it's sort of fun. But my point is, you've got to make sure you can be found.
Absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned the Alexa. Fortunately, mine has been disconnected. I've learned my lesson now after many live streams. I've done so many fun tests to the point where I actually did one in a podcast episode where I said, Alexa, subscribe to the Streamline Podcast. And I'm not sure if that was the exact phrase that I had to use, but it worked. And I went, okay. And then a few people actually reported back and said, hey, my Alexa just went off with your voice. So it's funny. It's becoming way more common now. People are spending less time looking at their screens and more time with their assistant in their ear, in their earbuds, their AirPods, their headphones, or their smart speakers in their home. I mean, we're talking now, you've got Alexa in your car. You've got all kinds of stuff going on. So it is really important. You know, it's that voice branding side of it as well. Being able to tell your fans, hey, this is how you say my name, and make sure it isn't a name that sounds like something else if possible. And you find that they might just start asking for you by name.
You should ask them to do you a favor and ask for you by name as an artist, right? And you should, like you said, you've done all sorts of tests. So have I. And as an artist, you should test Alexa out and make sure that Alexa can find you. I think that's really important. But I think it's just important to be found everywhere. I never assume where someone will find an artist's music. You know, it's like everywhere. Just have it as many places as you possibly can, accessible. So.
Definitely.
Okay.
And you know, one thing that I do like about these voice assistants is that they can get smarter. You can feed information into them. So if you're an artist and you do have a name that is a little unique, when you make a request to these smart speakers, such as Alexa, if you have the Alexa app on your phone or your other device, whenever you make a request, it records that. And then you can go in there and actually type exactly what you were looking for. So it goes, hey, Alexa believed that you said this. And you can say, no, I actually was looking for this. And if enough people do that, they'll start to direct Alexa to the right artist when they're making those requests. So they're getting smarter.
Right. Sometimes you have to spell it out. Like by the way, in that other example, I had to spell out Michael Colton. I had to say, Alexa, play Michael Colton. That was the only way I could get Alexa to understand. So, and now Alexa understands. So yes, we're sort of in the beginning of this artist discovery through voice. Definitely.
And it's funny. Everyone assumes that it's new, that learning how to pronounce an artist's name and say it correctly. I look back to radio, where sort of skipping the middle here and going back a little bit and showing a bit of my age, but the only way that you would know what song you were listening to is if the radio announcer would back announce it at the end of the song. So they would say, that was Michael Colton with a C, not Michael Bolton. But when you go into your record store, go and ask for Michael Colton. See, I messed it up. So that used to be the way that I would find out, okay, I love this song, I love this artist. And then you'd go to the record store and you would put your name and your number down and you would place that order, the pre-order. Whereas now we've got so much technology we've got access to. We've got Shazam. We've got Siri, of course, with Shazam.
Right.
We can find out what a song is easily enough, but somebody still needs to tell us how to pronounce that artist's name, so how to request it.
And I think it's interesting what you just said, because I've done radio shows for a long, long time, and it's always so torturous to think I might be mispronouncing an artist's name. I have nothing that tells me how to pronounce it. So maybe we'll get pronunciation metadata. What do you think? Possible. Wouldn't that be cool?
Very cool. Definitely.
Yeah, I like that. Anyway.
Okay, it's interesting, you know, when you put a song up with your distributor and you add all this additional information, or when you go into Spotify for artists and you submit your song to editorial and you tag the genre or the mood, we could talk about that for days. Imagine if you could also actually do a quick recording of how to pronounce the artist name correctly so that they can match that. Because all of these apps, you know, all of the DSPs, it's getting to the point where you can request music. Even within Spotify, there's that little microphone button you can press and you can actually speak what you're looking for. So it's definitely going to happen. And it would be great to be able to feed the correct information into there now. And potentially you may see people looking for Michael Bolton who start to get Michael Colton.
I love the idea. Let's do something about that. I love it.
Definitely. So I'm just taking a quick look at the comments here as well. there's a bit of love for you on LinkedIn right now. There's a few people asking the best ways to get in contact with Andrea. Obviously, we'll put all those up at the end. I have been writing back in the comments as you've been talking, just giving people a link too.
Multitasking, are we?
Absolutely. We've got some comments coming in. Dhruva. I feel like Dhruva is always tuned in, which is amazing because Dhruva made a comment in the last live stream. Dhruva was watching at night before going to bed, and there was a live stream, and then woke up and there was another live stream. So I don't know what the time difference is, but and we can see here, Dhruva, you're not too late. We're just getting started.
That's right.
Thanks for joining us, yeah. So where would you like to take this next? I mean, we could talk for days. If we start on playlists, it's gonna be a long stream.
So why don't we start? Was it Helga? What was the name of the person who's? I think it was Helga that you mentioned her question where she said, "Well, what do you suggest for a singer-songwriter just starting out?"
Yeah, that was Ada.
Ada. Sorry, Ada. My apologies. Sorry. So I think this idea about what some best practices might be if you're just starting out. Let's just say you have music that you've recorded and mixed and mastered that sounds to your ears fabulous, right? I think that's one of the biggest deals is you've got to fit in with the technical sound requirements of other music out there. It's really hard sometimes on the ears when emerging artists feel like they might have to skip part of that step. So that's the first thing I would say is just make the production as absolutely fabulous as possible, fully mixed and mastered. But let's say you're sitting on that, right? What do you do? One of the first things to do is plan way far ahead. I know that sounds really simple, but I cannot tell you how many artists come to us with just a couple of weeks before release date. And their release date is firm for some reason, because we're always trying to talk artists out of releasing too soon. It's really important, at least in our world, to have everything set up a long time in advance. A couple months is not too far ahead. And this plays into so many different things. It plays into a couple things. Number one, you've already mentioned Spotify for Artists and submitting your pitch on Spotify for Artists. You want to do that sooner than later. You have, if you do it at least a week in advance, then every one of your fans following your artist profile, they get your track in their release radar email. That's cool. But you want to do it even further ahead than that to maybe give the editorial teams a chance to discover your music. Those are long shots, but you want to take those long shots, right? We have had a couple of artists that we worked with who have been emerging artists who have gotten on editorial playlists immediately. The majority don't, but we've had a couple percentage of 1 or 2% of artists who have done that. So I would definitely take the time to do that. We could spend an entire hour on pitches, Spotify for Artists pitches, best pitches. But the other thing is to get it to your distributor in advance. So plan ahead so that it's to your distributor. 6 weeks is not too early. 2 weeks is too late, in my opinion. 6 weeks is not too early. Again, you want the distributor to be able to have the chance to discover it. Especially if you're with a new distributor, there seem to be all sorts of things that happen that make it difficult to get things done quickly. You want to be out there with your music prepared way before release date. We usually don't set release dates. When we work with an artist, we won't set a release date for at least 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, perfect. And the more lead time, the better.
The more lead time, the better, right?
I know the temptation has always been there, especially for an independent artist where they can set their own schedule and they could say, hey, I distribute my music with CD Baby and they could get my song on iTunes as quickly as tomorrow. That is not a good thing. I mean, it's cool that they can turn it around that quick, but nobody is going to get an opportunity to listen to that song within a span of 12 to 24 hours. It's just going to go out and then it's already out. what people don't understand is that most of the work happens in the 6 weeks before the song comes out. You see people at the major labels on a Friday once all the songs are out, and it's the most chilled you will ever see them. Obviously, they're still watching and monitoring, but they've done all the work already. There's nothing they can do once that song is out. It really is the work that goes in the lead up to it. And that's the same for independent artists. You don't have to be signed to a major. This is for anyone. The more lead time you can give, the more opportunities you can potentially receive.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And this seems to be a big part of the education for artists right now, is how important that is. I sort of liken it, I don't love this analogy, maybe you have a better one, Mike, but I liken it to a new car. Once you drive it off the lot, it's not worth as much as it was on the lot. And it's that way with a new track too. It doesn't mean you can't get traction after it's released. But Spotify says, to use them as an example, because they're more transparent than the other platforms right now, right? So they say they only have the bandwidth to pay attention to new releases. That's all they have the bandwidth for. And again, we have this number that everybody's talking about, 40,000 tracks on average being released daily. So they say they just can't go back and find tracks that have already been released. Their editorial teams are paying attention to what's being released now. So once it's out, you lose the opportunity to get any traction from them. Again, it might be a long shot, but you lose that opportunity. Also, one thing I wanted to say is, when you're a new artist just starting out, it's a build, right? So we see this over and over again. So the first track that you put out, or release that you put out, we should talk about that too, about staging releases over a period of time. But the first track you put out doesn't have as much of a following as the second. The second has more of a following. Why? Because you've been actively possibly getting your fans to go to the streaming platforms and getting them to listen. And Spotify's formulas and algorithms are starting to pay attention. So that first track you put out, it's not that it's lost, but in some ways the search engines on the platforms haven't found you yet. If you're not doing PR, those search functions also can't find you on the web and don't know where to position you as an artist. And you're just really, it's like this pushing a rock uphill for your first releases. Even if you're an artist that hasn't released in a long time, it can be like that too.
Definitely. And, I know you mentioned this. I just wanted to mention it again. And just another reason, if you need more reasons to give yourself more lead time on a release, as you said, you can guarantee that your original song will go into release radar for all of your followers on Spotify, as long as you submit that song in Spotify for Artists at least 7 days before release day. So that's one reason why, right there, and one of many. But also, when you're doing that same submission process, you're submitting to editorial. Now, like we said, in 7 days, it may not cycle around to the right person, and it may not be heard by them in time to be considered before it comes out. If you give 4 weeks, that's fantastic, because there's an opportunity that a few people could listen to it. They could add it to their own playlists. They could be listening at their desk. Their colleague could walk past and hear it and say, I like that song. By the time the song comes out, there's already a few playlists ready, queued up to include that song. So the lead time is crucial.
And going along with that, the lead time as far as getting your fans to get excited about your new music, right? And drawing them to the platform in that 4 to 6 weeks before release, my opinion is that that's one of the most important things you can do, is somehow get some activity on your artist profile once you've started releasing tracks in the 4 to 6 weeks before release. That just shows the platforms that there's some excitement out there. They're not looking to help you build your fan base. They're looking to jump on with artists who have a fan base, who are excited about their music, right?
Definitely. And that fan base grows with every song as well.
Right.
And I know you wanted to talk about this next. What's great is we actually had a question come in on LinkedIn which is exactly what we're about to discuss. So Alex Schofield wrote this, and let me just abbreviate the question slightly. I hope you don't mind, Alex, but would recording singles during the course of the year instead of releasing a project EP at the end of the year be beneficial? Meaning, should I just release singles and stick with singles, or should I build them up and then release a project or EP or album at the end of the year? I know you've got some strong opinions about this, so I'm going to let you jump in first, Andrea.
And then I want to hear what you have to say too. I think it's different for every artist. I think that we look at what the artist has going on with their fan base, what happened with the previous track that we've promoted, and how much material the artist has. So if you're telling me you have a dozen tracks, and also how the artist feels about the tracks, as in, are they a complete piece of work that the artist feels strongly should be part of an album? And all of that, I think, goes into the decisions. But having said that, and saying, okay, it's different for every artist. Right now, if what I said is true, which Spotify changes things all the time, all the platforms are changing things all the time. But if what I said is still true, which is Spotify only pays attention to new releases because that's all the bandwidth they have, then you want to be releasing single tracks or maybe EPs or whatever you can do more frequently to try and get their attention more often. What do you think?
Now you want to hear my opinion.
Yes.
Look, it's very similar. Maybe attacking from a slightly different angle, we'll see. But I think we're both focusing on the end goal here and long term. I always say that if you are working towards an album and you're finishing tracks individually, release them individually and build up towards that album. Because what happens is, every single song has its own opportunities. You can submit the single track for editorial consideration. You can get it into Release Radar. With each single release, ideally, your following will grow. And then what happens is, let's say you release 10 tracks over the span of 1 year, and at the end of the year, you release an album that has 15 tracks, and 10 of those you released earlier that year. What you can do is you use the existing ISRC, International Standard Recording Code, that's attached to those previously released tracks,
right,
on your album. And I did this with my own release as well. And the day that album comes out, people will look at it, they'll scroll down, they'll look at the tracks, and they'll see, wow, track 2 already has 20,000 streams. Track 5 already has 120,000 streams. Okay. And all of the numbers are actually merging from the single version to the album version and vice versa. So no matter where people are listening, those stream counts are going up and those songs are showing in your top tracks on Spotify. And it all links in nicely. And obviously, the other cool thing is, every time you release a single, you can obviously pitch that song for editorial, get it in Release Radar. When you release an EP or an album or anything with more than one track, you have to choose one track that you can submit. And it can't be a track that you've released previously. So when you release that album and there's some new songs on there, some new tracks on there, you get to pick one of those new tracks to put forward to editorial as well. And what I like about that is, when that album track goes into Release Radar or perhaps gets included in an editorial playlist, which is fantastic, people click from that, go to album, and they get directed to your album with the rest of your music. So I think that I always say, do singles and albums and EPs as well, if you like, by all means. Just every time you do a release, include at least one new track, so you've got something new for your fans that you can submit to editorial as well and get all of those benefits.
I like that. I like that. And also, I think that you also, whether if you're doing vinyl, I mean, I happen to be in a record store, so you can plan a timeline for releasing vinyl at some point, because everything that you do um, is another way to engage with your fans. I do want to say that sometimes artists will seem to release things too close together. What's the definition of that? There's no one definition, but it's just that you want to engage with your fans, but you don't want to push so heavily on them that they start to get turned off, right? But everything that you do, vinyl, if you go out to radio and you start having radio stations, playlisting campaign, press, your music, all of those things are opportunities to engage with your fan base. And it's one of the rules of advertising. You might know, Mike, I can't remember, but it's like how many times you have to repeat something in order for it to stick. Do you know, you've got all these opportunities to introduce your brand, engage with your brand. And that's really the goal. That should be the goal.
That's it. And, it's also consistency. If you release an album and you only get to put one track forward for consideration for editorial, and then everyone has to wait another year before you potentially reappear in their release radar, and they see you appearing on perhaps some other playlists, that's a long time between. I mean, I always say, especially in the early stages, consistency is the key. People are slowly warming up to you.
Right.
It's not always the case that somebody will hear one song and fall completely in love with you and become a super fan. Right. It may take a few songs to win them over.
Yeah, I sort of want to ask you a question about that, because a lot of times artists will ask me, should I put my best track out? I have nothing on Spotify or on the platform. Should I put my best track out first?
You know what? That's an interesting one, because it's your best track now, but will you do a better track the next time? I say, if you are stoked on a song, don't sit on it. Put it out. It's let's say that your end goal is that you want to be signed with a major, you want a publisher, you want all of that. There's nothing stopping you still putting that song out yourself. And if it gets the attention of somebody, the worst thing that could potentially happen is they come to you and go, we want to offer you this deal. We love the song. Do you like the deal? Yes. Okay. Take the song down right now, and we're going to put it back up in 2 weeks or something. It's really, there's no reason why you should sit on music. There's nothing that you need to be waiting for, especially in those early stages. And if you've got a song that you feel that strongly about, you need to put it out so people can discover it. And then what happens is you just keep creating, you keep going. I mean, if I were to look back on songs from 5 years ago versus songs from 1 year ago, there's a massive difference in the production quality, the overall sound, the songwriting, everything. So just put it out. Don't sit on it. That's my advice.
I'll tell you, I have one exception to that. And that is if you are a new artist and you don't have anything up on the streaming platforms, nothing, you're just starting out. A lot of times I'll recommend that you put out a track that leads up to the track that you think you resonate the most with, because it's all about resonating with the tracks. As far as I'm concerned. So that I will sometimes recommend that, just because the first track seems to get lost a little, and it is a build. But it's not even first or second best. It's just, if you have a really strong track that you really resonate with and you have nothing up, I sometimes recommend that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that can work as well. And look, if you do have that really strong track and it didn't get the results that you feel it deserved, there's no reason why you can't stack that onto a future release. As we mentioned, include that track in an EP or attach it to the next single as the second track. Obviously, if you've already submitted to editorial, you've missed that opportunity. But what may happen is people go and listen to this new EP that you've put out, they hit play, and your new song drove them there, and they go and they listen to the previous releases that are included on that EP as well.
Oh, yeah. I do that all the time as a curator. When I'm looking for music for my radio show, sometimes an artist will send me a track and it doesn't quite do it, but I will get on one of the platforms, Spotify, for example, and I will just sort of scroll down and click and listen. And then sometimes I find something that I really love. So, yes. Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I've always been a massive fan of an album, and I still am. So anytime an artist releases an album, people can argue albums aren't as popular now. They're not as much of a big deal. They're a big deal to me. I'm a music lover. So if there's an artist out there and they put out an album, for me it's great because it's anywhere from 50 to 80 minutes where I can go for a long car drive or I can go for a long walk and they can take me on a journey with their music. And albums tell a story. You know, there's interludes, there's different types of songs in there. It takes you on a journey. There's different emotions in each song. I feel that albums are still very important. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do albums, and I would never say that, but there's nothing wrong with releasing individual songs from that album in the build-up as well. And giving those songs another opportunity in the album, as we mentioned, if you have that song that didn't quite hit the first time, include it in the album, and you may be surprised. People may discover it, and it could just have a second wind.
Agree.
Awesome. So I'm just going to take a quick look at the comments on here again as well. So Ada and Alex are both very grateful for the responses on here.
Thanks, guys.
If anybody else wants to jump in with a question, feel free to post it wherever you are. Just to let you know, we are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and Periscope, which is on Twitter. So you can comment, and we can put those comments up on the screen as well. Obviously, if you've got a question, we love questions. So feel free to put those out too.
Yeah, we can keep talking about prep for new releases because there are a couple other things I think that could be important. And it all revolves around engaging fans and potential fans. And I think that a lot of times pre-save campaigns, for example, which I know you know all about, pre-saves, many artists do know about pre-save campaigns, but really it's just, for me, it's a smart link that you can present to a fan that allows them to engage on whichever platform they want to engage on. And it drives them to the platforms. So again, the platform of their choice, which is sort of fun because what if they like listening on SoundCloud? What if they like listening on YouTube or Pandora or wherever? It's not for us to say what the best platform is. It's what's the best platform for them. So pre-save campaigns can be really effective in easily helping to drive traffic to the platforms ahead of release. That's really all they're there for. And even using them after release, because again, they're a smart link. They're just a way to get to the music quickly. So that was one thing I wanted to mention about pre-release. Countdowns work. I always tell artists, hey, listen, if you give away a car, you could probably get a lot of people to sign up for your Spotify or whatever, to follow you on your profile wherever. But the thing is, you have to, and that's another reason to release music fairly often, is you have to give people a reason to want to follow you. And it's the music, right?
Yeah.
That, it might be your optics, might be you have fabulous optics and whatever, and they want to follow you, but it's really the music. So the more music you have out there that might possibly resonate with them, the better. So I wanted to mention those things. And a couple of other things about prepping for releases. And we keep saying this, but make as much noise as possible prior to release. Here's the other thing. Make sure your profiles are all filled out on all of the streaming platforms. This is good practice anyway, good form, but make sure your bio's up to date and that you have photos and that you have links to your socials, wherever you can add those to any of these, any of both the digital streaming platforms, but also any place else. There's so many other sites like Bands in Town and lots of other sites that I can't think of right this second, that you can go to and make sure you've got everything up to date before you release. That can help as well. What else? What else can we talk about here as far as release? Again, I'd ask people to engage their family and friends and ask them favors. So it's like, go out to your mailing list. Hopefully you have one, and go out to your mailing list and say, hey, will you do me a favor? It would really mean a lot to me if you take a minute and click on this link and follow me wherever you like to listen. That will help me to make revenue on my music. I mean, I think a lot of times fans don't understand what the ecosystem is. They don't really have a reason to know anything about it. And they don't even know that you make money on your music when it's listened to on the streaming platforms. So I think you have to help them to understand you want to make a living off your music. That might be your goal. Tell them what your goal is. Have a goal. So if you've got 100 fans, make your goal 200 fans. If you've got 10,000 fans, up at 20% or whatever it is. Those things can be helpful too.
Definitely. And the more people you tell about your goals, the more people that can hold you accountable as well and say, hey, you're hitting that goal. What's happening? Obviously, if your goal is to get followers, it's a little bit different, especially at the start. But what's some of the goals that you've seen from artists that you've worked with, whether a goal you set for them yourself or a goal that the artist came to you with and said, hey, I really want to achieve this. Can you help me?
Yeah, there are a couple of things to say about that. First is we think a 3 to 5% increase in artist profile followers is healthy on a monthly basis. That's arbitrary, but that seems to be healthy. That seems to say that fans are engaged. So a lot of times we'll have the artists understand that that's a goal. So if the artist is down at 1%, that might mean that they're not engaging enough with their fans. It's really just an indicator, right? It's like, okay, listen, your fans are increasing by about 1% a month. Usually we see about a 3 to 5% increase. So maybe look at what more you can do. And usually when we see that, it actually makes sense. The artists who only have a 1% following are not active on socials, for example. So that can happen kind of thing. The other thing is the other way around, which is not to pay for, and I know you say this, but not to pay for streams or followers, meaning not to go out and buy fake followers. It sort of muddies the water. So when I look at an artist, there are lots of indicators that we look at. But when we look at an artist's metrics and we look at their number of followers and their monthly listens and their total streams on all of their tracks, it can be very obvious when someone has gone out and tried to buy something just to make themselves look better. I mean, there's something to be said for looking better than you are, but it sort of muddies the water where we're not quite sure how now to present. Do you know? It's like we because we're trying to present an authentic picture of where the artist is when we pitch an artist to the third-party playlisters. This is an artist starting out, or this is an established artist you've heard of before, whatever. And so be careful not to muddy those waters. It really then it lacks credibility, and it makes it tougher for us to present, because then it looks like the artist might be just sort of doing things to get the numbers up, even though they're really not up. And also you're sort of doing yourself a disservice as an artist, because you then don't really know where you really are. I mean, do they want to engage with you? Do they want to, are they resonating with the music that you're putting out? And you sort of lose track of that to some degree. Does that make sense?
100%.
Yeah. So as far as other goals, I mean, we worked with an artist who had 1.25 million streams, 1.25 1.25 million streams. And I can remember being in phone calls and meetings where the team was really anxious, like, how do we get to 10 million? How do we get beyond 1 million? And that artist now has 50 or 60 million streams total on their profile. So how did they get there? Oh my gosh, you can name 100 ways. It's not just any one way. They have a really active fan base. They were really engaged with their fans. They love their fans. They consistently put out new music. They consistently pitched it in any way possible to anybody who would listen at the DSPs and anywhere. They just got really creative about doing that, and they got really connected that way. There were just many, many ways they did that, and I think that's the point. It can come, but it's over a lot, and that happened over 3 years, by the way. That didn't happen in a month. And I think that's the other thing to really address is expectations of how quickly things can happen. It can take months just to get past that awful less than 1,000 streams that you can see on Spotify and the small numbers you'll see on Apple and Pandora. It just is a build. It doesn't happen most of the time overnight. It can, magic can happen, but most of the time it's a build, one by one, fan by fan.
Definitely. It really is long-term. It's not overnight success by any means. It may look like some people achieve overnight success, but the reality is they could have spent 10 years creating music before one of their tracks finally hit. And then that success came. So really, you could argue it was 10 years in the making. And the other side of that is, once again, these songs that appear to just come out of nowhere with no announcements or anything like that, they were planned. They were planned for a long time. No artist just goes, hey, guess what? I just finished this song. I'm bouncing out the Ableton session right now, and you can stream it in 2 hours. It's just, no. I mean, yeah, that's cool. That's exciting. They say that and people get excited and go, wow, I can't believe I'm hearing it right now. But the reality is there was a lot more time in there that you didn't see in the lead up to that. And obviously the lead time between when they put it out with their distributor or they handed it over to the label who then set the strategy for them.
Yeah, I quoted, there are a couple of things I've heard recently. I don't know how true these are, but that Chance the Rapper, who's self-made, do it yourself, right?
Yeah.
Had $1 million promotion budget behind him. I don't know how true that is or not, but I've heard that recently. And it really just speaks to this staging and timelines and the work that it takes to promote a track. It does that the tracks that you're finding on the streaming platforms that you're listening to, they're being worked. They're being worked. They're just not thrown out there. They are being worked hard. Also, I think one of Billie Eilish's managers said something about how they had this whole program set up. They had their timelines and their strategies set up to introduce Billie's tracks to the world. So, and again, it might have looked like, she just put them out there, but it was way different than that. So all of this planning and strategic execution is really important. It just you don't see it. You don't see behind the scenes.
Yeah. And I like the comment you made there. One of Billie Eilish's managers.
Right.
One of. It's these artists, once they get to a certain point, they have a team and everyone has a different role and a different responsibility.
Right. Right.
And obviously for an artist in those early stages, you're taking on all of those responsibilities yourself. Chance managed to stay independent, but choose his team. And got to the point where he was very smart and obviously very talented and has managed to maintain his independence and employ people himself to go out and do the work. And, I've got to say, Pat the manager, Chance's manager, is somebody that I would just love to sit down with and just pick his brain for hours, because the way that those two work together is mind-blowing. It truly is. And it's an inspiration for any artist out there, in particular independent, but just to show you the hustle and drive and what you can achieve once you have an understanding of what needs to be done and who you need. That team could be delivered to you by a major record label, or you could get to the point where you build yourself up enough as an independent artist that you can hire your own team and start outsourcing some of the work you were doing yourself to other people. Like you mentioned, playlist pitching. If you're reaching out to 500 playlist curators every time you have a new song,
right.
It could get to the point where you may have somebody else and you can say, look, this is my list. These are the ones that always love to hear from me. So make sure you send them first, send them a copy first, give them a little extra love. And here's the list. I want you to make sure that you get this to them. And you've now freed up that much time, and you see the value in that you can actually employ somebody to take that over for you. And it continues from there as well. If you need help with bookings, do you want a manager to come in and take over your existing bookings and take a cut? Or are you looking to employ somebody yourself where you have a little more control? So there's a lot of things out there that when an artist actually does the work themselves first, they understand the value and they understand how much time they will get back and what they could do with that time, that they can start investing in themselves as well.
Yeah, I think it's also understanding that it can take the market a long time to respond. And also, again, something I read recently about, and Billie Eilish is, so huge, but that something went viral on SoundCloud for her. Something happened, right? Something unexpected happened. Something really resonated. And I think that if I'm going to say possibly that's what started, seeing that happened, that's how things might have gotten started, right? So as an artist, when you're really trying to work your tracks and things aren't happening as quickly as you'd like them to, which I would say is probably the majority of artists, right? If not all artists want things to happen faster than they're happening. Here's the other question, do you put out another track? What do you do? Do you push that track? Do you try to push that track and pull that track into existence? Where are you in the ecosystem, and what tools are you using to get people to number one, find your music, and number two, resonate with your music? And again, there's no one answer, but sometimes you have to play around with that. Sometimes it's, sometimes we'll send a track out to rock and roll playlisters, and it's the Americana playlisters who pick it up. We don't always know where things are going to happen, and that's the marketplace. We're just determined to get it out into the marketplace and get it heard and get some traction on it. So just this whole thing about I like to say that I'd love to handle somebody full time just to manage everybody's expectations. It's just that there's just a path that I don't know that there are many shortcuts to, of really just getting the music out there and getting it out there and having the marketplace respond. And it's all timing, right?
Yep.
Can you imagine Beethoven? Do you know Beethoven was composing for how many years? And if he thought it should happen in a month, right? And then he got really upset because he had less than 1,000 streams. Do you know? It's like, it's a build. It's a build, and it's word of mouth, and it's the sound, and it's the market, and it's what's going on now. So all of that, I think, matters greatly. So just keep putting it out there.
Yep. And all of this work that you're putting in now is preparing you for, if, I prefer to say when, but we'll say if it happens. That's it. You may go, I've just spent 10 hours today working on this and I'm not seeing any results, but maybe 2 years from now, you go, wow, I'm so glad I put in that time all those years ago. I'm so much more ready for this now.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. Someone said artists quit too soon, and I totally agree. I totally agree. Yeah. It's just you have to be in it for the long haul. You have to be really committed, and that's tough. Resources are scarce for a lot of artists, and I get that. And then there's always that question of where's the best use of your resources. And I think you have to make mistakes, and you have to understand that it's a long road, and it's going to be penny by penny, dime by dime, much of the time.
Definitely. So I'm just going to jump in here and shout out a couple of people that hit us up just before. So posted the question up online in the comments, asking people where they're watching from. So we've got Ada Heston is tuned in from Brighton in the United Kingdom.
Oh, hey.
And Jamie Lane tuned in from Irvine, California.
Oh, great place, Irvine.
Yeah. Jamie, I'm actually going to be speaking at NAMM in Anaheim this Sunday. So if you happen to be attending NAMM, and for anyone that's watching that's attending NAMM in Anaheim, California, I will be speaking there on Sunday morning on a panel on monetizing your music 101. But I feel like it's going to go from 101 to 109. We are going to be at the next level. Some really cool guests on that panel as well, but this isn't a plug. You can go and Google that online after this. Andrea, I would like to share some links on where people can find you and more information about DPG worldwide as well.
Sure. So first of all, our website's a great place. You can sign up for our newsletter there, and you can read about our company and some of the artists that we worked with. It's dpgworldwide.com. So that's a great place to find us. We as I said, we help artists build their presence on the streaming platforms. And we do that through reaching out to user-generated playlists, cross-platform, worldwide. So that can be really helpful. That can really, as I like to say, salt the pot, can really help get things going. And it also can help if you're an established artist who might be getting on editorial playlists even, for example, they sometimes only last a week or two, those placements, and you want to be engaged beyond that. So we focus on all of that. I don't know, do you have our Twitter? We're also up on, Twitter's a great resource, by the way, for the music community. You know that.
There it is.
DPG Worldwide 1, and you can follow us on Instagram, of course. And we're DPG Worldwide there. So I'd love to hear from anybody who would like to connect about the nerdy topics that you and I could talk about for days, which is really just about getting your music heard. What can you do in this space? It's so new. It's so new, and things are changing so quickly. I used to say, don't do what I told you to do 6 months ago. Now I say, don't do what I told you to do yesterday. But but it's all good.
It is. It's changing constantly, and
it's good.
It's exciting. That's why I love doing these live streams, because this podcast will be up as quickly as possible because of that exact reason, that if I wait 2 weeks to put this up, some of this information may be out of date. So we want to give you information as quickly as possible. Just having a quick look again, there's more people that are shouting out on here, letting us know where they're from. So we've got Jasmine is tuned in from Seattle.
Oh, hey,
and Alex from Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh, I love Nashville.
Nashville. It's like a second home. I can't really say second home because Australia and California. It's another home. Absolutely. Nashville feels like a home to me, and everyone is so welcoming. And
so much going on there in the music business, right? So much going on for songwriters and for artists, performers, so much energy and education there.
Mm. Lots of great people in Nashville right now.
Oh yeah.
Too many to mention.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we might wrap this up for now. But if it's okay with you, after this, I might just keep an eye on the comments. And if anyone has any questions that we didn't get to in this recording, the replay will be online. The podcast will be available shortly, Streamline Podcast, on all good podcasting platforms. And obviously, jump into the comments and keep firing away with those questions as well. Happy to hear from you. And Andrea, as mentioned, just one more time, Twitter at DPG Worldwide and the number 1 at the end. Instagram at DPG Worldwide and dpgworldwide.com.
Thanks, Mike. I really enjoyed nerding out with you today, and we'll have to do it again.
We are going to do it again for sure. Absolutely. I have no doubt we will be doing something soon. I wish we could say what we are potentially cooking up.
No.
But let's just say this won't be the last time you hear from us.
Okay.
Whether it's a podcast or another medium.
All right. Well, live from Rochester, New York, signing off. Thanks, guys. Get your music heard.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
Thanks, Mike.
Bye.